Hey everybody, this is Valerie. Don't watch at night warning up top. This is a book club episode, meaning that months in advance we selected a book and we announced it on our show for you to read along with us so that you could then come to the discussion episode. If you've read the book, you're ready. If you haven't had a chance to read it yet, but you really want to, we have tons of resources and reviews in our show notes for you to look through. Otherwise, do consider the fact that we're about to drop some spoilers galore. So now you get to choose your own adventure. Welcome back, everybody. This is Don't Watch at Night, your friendly podcast dedicated to spooky movies and spooky books of the Spanish language and Latin American horror variety. I am your host, Valerie.
And I'm Veronica.
And as you've noticed, we have a name change. Normally, I would have said Scream Sister, but we are now Don't Watch at Night. We are entering our second year of podcasting this summer. As of July, we will hit our second year. So we're very excited about that. We have a lot of good things that are happening for us right now. But funny little story. Veronica and I have two wonderful parents who have been our biggest supporters from day one. They listen to our show every week. And our mother, she's not into horror films at all, right, Ron? She's like, this is just not her cup of tea. But she wants to support us. So every episode, she will listen in. She will hear whatever she needs to do about the movie that we've watched, and then she'll kind of gauge. She'll ask us, what is this film? Would I like it? Can I get through it? For her, it's all about can I get through it? Because, like we said, she's just not a horror nut. And so we will give her honest feedback. We will tell her, yeah, probably handle this one. We will flat out tell her some episodes we've told her, no, don't watch this. You can't get through it. But a lot of times what I will say to her, what Ron might say to her is like, sure, yeah, you can get through this, no problem. Don't watch it at night, right before bed. That's not a good idea for you unless you're trying to have nightmares all night long. So this was just one of those instances where I was saying that to her about a particular film that we've watched and talked about on this show. Our father overheard that. He's like, hey, what if you name the show that? And it kind of caught on from there. So we are entering a new chapter, a new era, a new show name, Don't Watch at Night. Guys, we have a lot to cover today, many notes. And so anytime we come armed with many notes, we know there's going to be a lot to talk about. So we best just get to it. The majority of this podcast, we cover films. We do film discussions, but we do have an ongoing book club. It is the Don't Watch Book Club. And if you're interested in joining it, you can visit us at our new home, don'twatchatnight.com, and join our book club list from there. Every book club, we feature a cocktail, and we're going to launch into that right now. If you've read the book, if you're familiar with it, then you know that aguardiente is featured throughout the book. It's heavily featured throughout the book. And so upon finishing this book, I had the thought that, we've got to incorporate this in the drink somehow. I've never had it before. I didn't know of it. And so I thought, this is an opportunity to try something new. I am not a bar connoisseur. I am not a mixologist. I'm not a professional. I've never worked in the service industry when it comes to bar stuff. So I'm excited to show and tell today because this will be the first beverage that we have featured on our book club episodes, at least as far as I can tell from digging around on the internet, that it's not already a drink in existence. What I'm trying to say is I think that I came up with my own cocktail this week, and I'm excited to share that with you guys as my internet contribution to society. Aguardiente is the drink of choice for Montgomery in the book, The Daughter of Doctor Moreau. He spends a lot of his days imbibing that. It's known to be a very popular drink in Colombia, or it used to be anyway. There's a lot of market competition nowadays, so people drink plenty of other things besides aguardiente, but it's said to be their national drink. And the image that pops up the most if you go and Google search aguardiente is aguardiente antioqueño. And this is a bottle that I was able to find at the store. So FYI, for those of you looking to try to find this on your own. I found it in the liquor store under the brandy and cognac section. And it runs about $20, so not very expensive at all. Years and years ago, aguardiente used to be like 40% alcohol, and now it's more like 29% alcohol, ABV. So not super high as compared to other straightforward spirits. It's not going to be as high as like your bourbon or your tequila. Thursday, when I was like testing cocktail recipes and I was messaging Ronnie about this stuff, I think I said, it's not as high as wine. That's a lie. It is higher than wine, but it is lower than your bourbons or your vodkas or tequilas or things like that, other straightforward spirits. It's a clear alcohol and it has a very distinct anise or licorice flavor. Is that a flavor that you like, Veronica?
No.
Yeah. Definitively for me, no either. Anyway, it posed a challenge, this liquor, because like I said, I don't like this flavor. You would typically drink aguardiente neat and maybe follow it up with a beer afterhand. This is generally how it's enjoyed in regions like Colombia. Once I got the bottle home, what are you doing? I don't feel like I have your attention.
Well, I'm not that interested in the liquor part because I don't drink it. But I just realized that the Google Doc you sent me with the book club questions had other pages, so I didn't scroll down. So now I'm scrolling down to I just stopped at the questions because I thought that was it. And now I'm realizing
go through it. It's so good. We'll talk about it, but it's so detailed. I love it. Anyway, okay, so let me get through it. Since Veronica's so uninterested, let me get through.
I'm drinking my tea.
Good for you. I'm glad. I forgot to ask. I'm glad you're drinking tea today. When I got home, I opened this bottle. I immediately got the notes of anise, and it was giving me that reminder, that flavor of absinthe. And so my first instinct was to try this in a Sazerac. A Sazerac, for those of you who don't know, is a rye with what?
Sounds like the Kwisatz Haderach from Dune. Anyway,
go on. It's a rye whiskey. You coat the glass in an absinthe wash, and then you do a rye whiskey.
Sounds like too much work already. No, even if I was a drinker.
It's delicious. And anyway, it's very good. I did not go that route because I didn't have a rye whiskey on hand, but that was my first impulse. Try a Sazerac. So if you have a rye whiskey, consider subbing out the absinthe for aguardiente. Just understand that it's going to be lower ABV than an absinthe would be. If you look at drinks like the Bee's Knees or the Gold Rush, or something called the penicillin cocktail, which features scotch, all of these things incorporate fresh lemon juice and usually some kind of honey-based simple syrup. So I looked at all of that. This spirit seems to behave a little bit like it would incorporate well with a gin. Then that's what I had. So I tried my hand at aguardiente, gin, fresh lemon juice, and a turmeric ginger tea simple syrup. And it came out really, really great. If you like a Bee's Knees cocktail, or if you like any of those other ones I named, then this will be kind of in that it follows the same principles. You'll enjoy this. Just FYI, the turmeric ginger tea syrup I made because we have that tea in our house. So I just steeped a bag of that in a pot with a 1-to-1 ratio of sugar and water, and I simmered that over the stove. I did 1 ounce of aguardiente, 1 ounce of gin. I did a 1/2 ounce of lemon juice, but you could bump that up and do a full ounce if you want. And then I did a 3/4 ounce of the turmeric ginger tea syrup. And I've named this cocktail because I believe that this does not exist on the internet. I have created it. I named it the Moreau after the daughter of Dr. Moreau. We always do a mocktail as well. So if you've done a mocktail, if you're into mocktails, there is something called the non-alcoholic Bee's Knees where you can use a non-alcoholic gin of your choice or a sparkling water, lemon juice, simple syrup. There's a brand of non-alcoholic bitters called All the Bitter, and they have a bottle of lavender bitters, so you can include some of that in the drink, and it just sort of adds something a little more elevated. The All the Bitter website, allthebitter.com, I think is what it is. They have a name for this drink, but because of the book club, I've renamed it the Carlotta Elixir. So you can have the Moreau or the Carlotta Elixir. Okay, so the name of the book that we read was, as I said, The Daughter of Doctor Moreau by Silvia Moreno-Garcia. Here is a quick blurb about it. Carlotta Moreau, a young woman growing up on a distant and luxuriant estate safe from the conflict and strife of the Yucatan Peninsula, the only daughter of a researcher who is either a genius or a madman. Montgomery Lawton, a melancholic overseer with a tragic past and a propensity for alcohol, an outcast who assists Dr. Moreau with his experiments, which are financed by the Lazaldes, owners of magnificent haciendas and plentiful coffers. Then there are the hybrids, the fruits of the doctor's labor, destined to blindly obey their creator and remain in the shadows, a motley group of part human, part animal monstrosities. All of them live in a perfectly balanced and static world, which is jolted by the abrupt arrival of Eduardo, the charming and careless son of Dr. Moreau's patron, who will unwittingly begin a dangerous chain reaction. For Moreau keeps secrets, Carlotta has questions, and in the sweltering heat of the jungle, passions may ignite. The Daughter of Dr. Moreau is both a dazzling historical novel and a daring science fiction journey. So, Veronica, you are the freshest in terms of thoughts on this book, because I finished this book a while ago, but you probably just finished it this week, did you not?
Last night.
So what were your overall thoughts and impressions coming away from this read? Did you do an audiobook?
I did both. I did maybe almost half the book reading it, and then I switched to audiobook just because I was running out of time and I needed to, and I can speed up the reading up a little bit on audiobook.
Before you say anything, I will say I saw people comment on Goodreads that the audiobook is quite good.
It's good. I mean, the narrator does a good job with all the, switching from the Mexican accents to Moreau's French accents and differentiating the voices. So
okay,
she did a good job. I didn't catch the narrator's name, but whoever it was, she did a good job. Like, I have the trade back edition of this book, and I'm assuming all the hardback, if it wasn't hardback, I'm not even sure, had end paper. So this was the end papers. What do you see, Valerie?
I see a lovely lady and two gentlemen. This is what I had in my book as well. Yes.
Yes.
In the books that I've read by Silvia Moreno-Garcia, she has the art in the insides of the book as well.
But this picture
denotes romance. Specifically
love triangle. So I was like, oh, okay.
Which is
so
Veronica's nemesis, because she hates happiness and joy.
Anyone who's been listening to this podcast from the beginning knows my thoughts on
I don't know
romance in general, but love triangle specific. Now, I will say this was not a true love triangle, because a true love triangle has like the person in the middle who has romantic feelings for both parties, and that was not the case here. So
yes,
this was my first book by this author, Silvia Moreno-Garcia. So she's a good writer. She can craft some good sentences. It's just, and I'm going to kind of borrow from the very first review that you emailed me. I don't know in what order they are going to be in the show notes, but the one from the Grimdark magazine review, there was a line in there that pretty much encapsulates how I feel about this book. It says the historical setting is superb, which it's okay, but the science fiction elements play less of a part in the novel than I anticipated and are overtaken by Carlotta's coming-of-age narrative and the romantic aspects of the story. If you like coming-of-age stories or stronger romantic elements in your books, then you would probably love this book. But I would have preferred the focus to have been more on the science fiction parts. I wouldn't even really say there was much horror as compared to the original story by H.G. Wells. This book didn't really have what I would consider horror-y elements to it, and too much of the focus was on Carlotta's inner musings and Montgomery's inner musings, and it was okay. I wasn't, in love with it. It's not probably something I would ever reread. Not something it just didn't ring all the bells.
Yeah,
I was hoping for.
So, we'll get to it. But were you at least?
But it's personal taste, that somebody loves those things coming of age.
Did you? Well, and you're not alone. Like, a lot of the reviews that I looked at from readers were beautifully written book. Didn't necessarily, and these were coming from people who are big readers, have read other stuff of Silvia Moreno-Garcia, who I think is a beautiful writer. And I will get to what my thoughts on the book here in a second, but who felt the same way, that beautifully told story didn't necessarily grab them. Not necessarily a story that it's like it stays with them. Like when I read Mexican Gothic, I thought it was a great book. When I read this book, again, in my opinion, a good book that I enjoyed a lot. But as soon as I finished it, And there's a specific reason why I feel this way. But as soon as I finished it, I was like, well, okay. Because for me, and I'm vastly different from Veronica, but for me, there is not an HEA at the end of this book. There is not a happily ever after.
See, that's true.
And I know you liked it.
I
You
was
liked
fine
that,
with
didn't
the
you?
ending. Yes,
You were fine with it. I know
was
you were.
fine with the ending.
Meanwhile, me, I was like, this is not satisfying. Like, it's not satisfying, even though it was a well-written ending, and we'll get to that. But I thought maybe you might at least appreciate that. Yeah, they don't end up together. Stop.
No, there was no way.
Mhm.
I mean, Eduardo, he was not going to work out. He was not going to be the one. But there was no way that I would have ever rooted for Montgomery and Carlotta, because there was, for me,
May I ask why?
For a big ick factor, because he was 29 at the beginning of the book, and she was 14.
Okay, yeah.
And
you're not alone. Again, you're not
even though
alone.
they do a 6-year time jump, and she's like 19 or 20, and then he's 30, just the fact that he met her as a child, was never ever going to work for me.
Okay, so we will get to that, because I did pull feedback from readers online who have similar things to say. So we'll get to that part. But let me first give my thoughts on the read, because I had a lot of fun with this book. Let me just say, I haven't read everything Silvia Moreno-Garcia has written, but I've read a couple of things. And I would encourage you guys, if this is the only book of hers that you've written, I would encourage you to read some of her other books as well, because at least in what I've read so far, she does incorporate science elements into her story, and she's really great. I appreciate the world building that she does in her writing. For lack of another way to say it, I think she's very thorough in her world building. It allows me to kind of breathe into her books and get a deep sense of the setting and atmosphere and vibe that she's creating through her stories. And I kind of felt the same way with Our Share of Night, FYI listeners, which is another book that Veronica was like not diving into, but I liked Our Share of Night a lot. And this book, I had no problem with. So I like the concept of this book, because I think the story of Dr. Moreau is such a fun one to explore. This week, I did kind of watch, I did take on another very notorious version of this story, and we'll talk about it later. But yeah, the approach to tell this story through the eyes of the daughter, I thought that was a fun and interesting concept. I enjoyed it. Did it leave lasting impressions with me as compared to some of the other stuff that I've read by this author? No, it didn't. And was I happy with the ending? No, I wasn't, because I feel a little bit differently than Veronica and some of the other readers that we'll mention later in terms of like the age gap. But I totally understand where those readers and Ronnie are coming from with that.
No.
So I liked Carlotta and who is it? Lupe? Is
Lupe.
that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I liked that dynamic. What did you think of that? Like
Carlotta,
the sister
Carlotta I found boring.
Okay, tell me more.
But I did like Lupe, and I actually would have liked more of the focus to have been on Carlotta's relationships with Lupe and Cachito and the other hybrids, as opposed to like Eduardo or Montgomery or even her father. I mean, for me, that was like a missed opportunity I was more interested in the hybrids, and
I was more interested in the hybrids
and what was going on with them than what was going on. All those things, the hybrids, the ethical implications, the morality implications of the experiments that Moreau is doing, the concept of found family, which this was a perfect avenue for that. And even the history of what's going on in the background of the story with the conflict between the Mayan rebels and the Mexican government and the Europeans that are colonizing everything. It's mentioned, and it's kind of in the backdrop. And so that was unsatisfying to me. I just wanted more depth to it in all the areas that she wasn't digging deep. Like she was digging deep.
There were areas where she was digging deep, but like you're saying that in the areas where she wasn't, that's where you would have preferred her to go deeper. Yeah, that's where my
interest was. Yeah. I wasn't really interested in Carlotta's romantic future, and I wasn't interested in Montgomery's, past. And
well, yeah. So like anytime this was my note, anytime the story leaned into its science fiction base and even like dove a little bit into horror, I enjoyed it a lot, obviously. And of course, I would have loved to have stayed in those spaces of the book even longer. So I kind of had the same concept. I did want to take you guys through the book club questions that Silvia Moreno-Garcia posed for readers, and Ron, maybe this will prompt more discussion. Were there other things you wanted to say before we launched into that, though?
Very slice of life, which, is not my thing, might be your thing.
Clarify that for me, please. When you say slice of life, which is not really your cup of tea, like, what does that mean? So you're not interested in like hearing, say more about that.
That's a lot of what like literary fiction is, like, which
Mhm.
typically are the books that are always make those book club lists. And that's why I don't read a lot of literary fiction, because it's very slice of life. It's just like there's not really a plot. It's just kind of this is these people's lives.
I would be very
That doesn't
interested
sound
to know,
interesting to me.
like, I want to know what books are nailing it for you in that realm, because
Literary fiction, not. I need a plot. There to be a focus to the story. So that's why I read mysteries, because there's a
Okay.
problem to solve. The characters are solving it. I read fantasy because there's usually some kind of evil that has to be defeated, or a quest or something.
Yeah.
I read science fiction for the same reasons. Literary fiction, it's just kind of this meandering, day-to-day humdrum lives, and I'm like, where are we going with this? You're leading me around and we're not getting anywhere. But some
World
people,
building.
obviously, a lot of people love those stories because those are kind of the books that generally get picked for like book club,
Yeah.
But, it's just, not every book is for every person. And
Yeah.
that's fine.
Okay. Well, let's dive into some discussion questions. There are some interesting questions in here that I had meant to look at prior to this book club so that I would have a chance to really think about them. I, of course, didn't do that. I ran out of time. We are not professionals, and nor are we trying to be. Please don't confuse us with those folks.
I don't think anybody would.
Nah, if you're smart, you wouldn't. If you pay attention and you listen, you wouldn't. But anyway, so yeah, let's get to it then. The top question: what did you think about Carlotta? What was your obviously, because I think you already talked a little bit about what you thought about Carlotta, but what was your favorite character and why? So who was your favorite character?
My favorite character was Lupe, because she just kind of, she says it like it is.
Well, she had a backbone. She had
she had a backbone, and she had some spunk, and she wasn't in the book enough, and she wasn't explored enough. There wasn't near enough attention spent on her. But I liked her because she, she had some backbone. Carlotta, I mean, I didn't dislike Carlotta. I just didn't find her terribly interesting. For most of the book, she's just kind of docile and going around and accepting of everything. And
right. Yeah.
And
so it's
even at the end where she was standing up, by that point I was kind of like mentally checked out on her.
Well, so Carlotta, I guess where the book opens. I will say this with Carlotta, Lupe, and Lupe's brother Cachito. What I thought was really fun and executed really well was sort of the revelation that these are hybrids. When the book starts, you don't necessarily put it together that Lupe and Conchito are hybrids, and you certainly don't put it together that Carlotta is a hybrid as well.
I did.
You did?
I knew it from the jump. Yeah. Just the way that it was described, how, and in Montgomery's, when we're in his head, about how graceful she moves and her honey color. I mean, I was like, I immediately got Cat off of her.
Okay. Well, see, like if I had remembered, and we'll get to it later, guys, but if I had remembered, I've only ever seen the 1996 version of the Island of Dr. Moreau, the film. I've only ever seen it one time, and that's when it came out. If I had remembered it, then I would have remembered there is a daughter in that movie. And so I would have put it together that, Carlotta.
Well, there is no daughter in the actual
There's no daughter in the actual book. Yeah. So,
and then all the mention of how she was always sick as a child. I mean, that was not a clue to you?
Well, I knew she was getting treated by her father, but I thought the revelation, I think by the time we get the reveal that Carlotta is a hybrid, I'd already put that together a little bit. But I think the revelation that Cachito and Lupe are hybrids, I thought was nicely done. I did not see that coming. And so then when she unveiled that in the book, I thought, anyway, I liked Lupe as well. I thought she was the character that had the backbone. And Carlotta is trying to come to terms with what her father's done and trying to reconcile that with her faith and her station in the world. She's never seen the world beyond that, versus Montgomery has. So when Montgomery comes into the book, he's coming from, I think One of the last places he was like Cuba. He's been around. He's like, I think at this point in the book, what is he like?
He's 29 at the start of the
start of the book.
At the start of the book, and then flash forward 6 years, so he's 35 through the rest of the book.
Yeah, so by all accounts, still a young man, but he's been around, seen the world, done some stuff, had other jobs besides this job, and so yeah, they're just coming from different perspectives. Okay, so how did you feel, Ron, about the relationship between Carlotta and this is a question I already know the answer to. What do you think of Carlotta and Eduardo?
I didn't.
And Carlotta and Montgomery, for that matter.
Well, that one I've already told you. That was just icky to me. That's creepy.
So you found them both icky then?
Well, Eduardo wasn't icky, but it's just I knew from the beginning, his introduction, that relationship was going to go south for whatever reason. I didn't know if he was going to turn out to be. I mean, I pretty much sensed that he was going to.
Oh, he sucked. He sucked.
But there was always the chance that he, maybe he would have stood up to his father and had a different viewpoint. Like Carlotta has a different viewpoint from her father. So it could have gone either way, but I was 85% sure that he was just going to be.
Would you have rooted for him? Would you have rooted for him if he had made that change? That character?
Possibly. But
see, I wouldn't, but that's because I was already on Montgomery's side. I was already in that camp.
Is a 35-year-old alcoholic. Why would you want Carlotta to be with a 35-year-old alcoholic?
Well,
in fact, in my head canon, at the end of in the future, he drinks himself to death somewhere.
Are you serious?
Yes. He was annoying.
In your head canon, you don't think at some point he's
a dead drunk somewhere.
You have no forgiveness in your heart.
It's not about forgiveness. It's just a man's an alcoholic.
What if he goes off and heals thyself and figures his shit out and comes back and is,
he still would have known her as a child.
Well, yeah. Okay. So
that's too close to grooming someone to be. No, that was never going to work for me. Never, ever in a million years.
Well, so let's get to that because we might as well touch on it since it's coming up twice now. So let me just say, with the dynamic between Montgomery and Carlotta, which Veronica has already voiced her opinions on, I was not unhappy with the ending. I understand it made sense for the story and for these two characters, and it felt like the right progression. But I did feel for this poor man, for Montgomery, who is a flawed, imperfect character, worthy of, I suppose, disdain for some and pity and whatever for others. But I felt for him and for his situation. And I just was like, will someone not love him? Like his estranged wife in the book does not want him. Carlotta obviously does not return his affections. Is there nobody who sees the good in this man and what is honorable about him, especially as compared to
Carlotta does. She just doesn't have romantic, which that's the one place where I will give this story huge kudos, because in most stories, and I hate this when it happens in movies or TV shows where someone has never been shown to have any romantic interest in somebody, but then the minute they find out that other person has romantic feelings for them, it's like, oh, all of a sudden, oh, yes, I do love you. I have been in love with you all this time. And I hate that because it makes no freaking sense. You don't just start to love someone because you find out that, oh, they have those feelings for me. So I very much applaud and appreciate that Silvia Moreno-Garcia did not go that route in this movie, that even though Carlotta realized, or I think Montgomery came out and actually, if not blatantly told her, strongly alluded to it, that he loves her, it did not shift her heart. She cares about him. She considers him family. He's dear to her. He's important to her, but she's not in love with him. And that did not change. And I thumbs up for me. I know you didn't. I know you wanted them together, but no.
Yeah, but I understand what you're saying, and I think that you're right in that Silvia Moreno-Garcia honors these characters she's created and honors what would be true for them, which is what you're saying. That yes, Carlotta would not necessarily just automatically be in love with this man who has been in her world since she was a child, basically. Yeah. So yeah, I agree with that, even though I felt great empathy for him and wanted some bit of happiness for this poor man.
Well, and that's the other thing, think about the places that they are in their lives. Like you said, at this point, Montgomery's 35 years old. He's had this life. He's had all these experience. He's been to all these places in the world. He's made a lot of mistakes, a lot of bad choices, but he's had a life. Carlotta, she's just getting started. She has things to explore. She has a life to live.
She has mistakes to go make. Go make some mistakes.
And so why would anybody want her to be, okay, let's get with Montgomery and this is going to be my life now, married to this man, and I hope he doesn't come home drunk every night. Why would you wish that for her? Let her go have a life. Go live, Carlotta.
I don't know what Aguardiente was like back in the day of this novel, but as it is today, guys, it's not high ABV. You're not getting trash faced off of this liquor. But
I would imagine back then it was like,
it's probably higher, yeah.
Like you would like moonshine.
It was it was probably more like hooch,
especially the stuff that he could afford.
Okay, so let me say this part, because back to the age gap stuff, because I did come across some thoughts from readers online about this book. I don't generally get bothered by age gaps, me personally, because in things like historical books, the setting of the book, the time and place, all of that factors into my consideration. So I'm paying attention to the time period of this book.
Yeah.
Hang on. I'm paying attention to what would have been socially acceptable of the time, what was already in practice of the time. So I don't necessarily, granted, when they meet, yes, she's 14, he's 29. That is a big gap. But once she's of age and he's like 35, it doesn't strike me as so unusual. So
if they had just met at that point, but she's in my mind.
Let me get through it. You've already stated your point. No, now it is my turn. So I am usually a willing audience for these things. So I didn't take umbrage with that at all. But, Ron's not alone. I did come across thoughts from other readers who, for them, the age gaps in general, one reader in particular was saying how, like, just in light of the Me Too movement and kind of where things have shifted in time and kind of understanding the power dynamics at play when we're talking about relationships where somebody is a child, when you first meet that person, where somebody might still possess their virginity when they meet somebody, when somebody might have a limited, sheltered view, as Carlotta does in this book, from the rest of society.
Well, just the fact that our brains aren't even
fully
mature
developed. Yeah.
Until like our early 20s.
So this reader said, I was surprised to find that there were a number of readers who, whereas I was like, yeah, Team Montgomery, there were a lot of readers who were like, Montgomery and Eduardo, that's both ick. So, and one reader said it's really hard for her to invest in any potential relationship where the age gap is that big, regardless of setting and historical context. It's just not something that she can get behind because of all those reasons I stated, because of what we know about the uneven dynamics of a relationship that starts in one of you is a child, one of you is possibly a virgin, one of you has never seen life outside of your little nucleus. So
I know time-wise that was the thing. I read a story once that was based on a real life medieval knight, and he was in his 50s and he married a 16-year-old girl. And I know back then, intellectually, I know that was what they did back then, but I still am reading it with my modern day eyeballs, my modern day sensibilities, and I can read a book where people were like using, child labor and working children to death because that was the thing back then, but it's still not going to be acceptable to me reading it. So historically, I know that would not have probably been a big thing back in when was this book set? 1877?
Yeah, something like that.
But in 2024, it's ick to me.
So I will say, in defense of myself, because Veronica has her and some of these readers on her side, in defense of myself, the reason I just felt like Montgomery, when you compare Montgomery to Eduardo, it just felt like Montgomery's sensibilities were more aligned with Carlotta. His respect for the land that they inhabited and the people in their community, the hybrids, his respect and appreciation for these things more aligned with her than this little pompous Eduardo that she meets and falls head over heels for. So in my mind, I always felt like, well, these two are more well suited for one another and there's great affection there. That's why I was rooting for that. Although, like Ron said, like I completely understand why it ended the way it needed to, and why it was really important for it to end that way. Because even if, whether or not he dies from drinking himself to death, or Carlotta goes off and actually lives a life and gets world experience behind her before she may come back to him, I think that part is important. I think it's important for Carlotta to go off and live a life and then come back. And then if it's meant to be, it's meant to be.
Montgomery, I'm also another
Maybe he
trope.
sobers up, Veronica.
Well, that's the thing, though. And I'm not a believer in that, love is going to fix him. No, Montgomery has to go figure out his own shit.
His demons,
and do it on his own for himself, not for Carlotta, not for anybody else, for himself.
But that's
right.
Not
fix somebody else.
That's true, and it's valid, and so that's why I was like, okay, well, I have to accept that ending because that's the way it needed to be, even though I would have wanted to see those two together. Anyway, okay, next question.
What did you think about Carlotta's relationship with the hybrids? How does her attitude towards them differ from her father's, from Lizalde's, and how do you think you would react to the hybrids? Carlotta's relationship with the hybrids was not explored anywhere near as much as I would have liked. We know that she cares about them. She's concerned about their welfare, but we don't really see, even with Lupe, she doesn't have a whole lot of interaction with Lupe and Cachito. So I would have wanted more of that. Her father, their experiments to him, I don't know that he really views them as anything other than the results of his life's work. I don't think he really views them as thinking, feeling beings that have goals and opinions of their own.
Well, and kind of the way that it's framed in the book is that these hybrids are so Carlotta is viewed as like this perfect. He stumbled on creating Carlotta and she was perfect. And then he's never been able to duplicate that. He's never been able to replicate that. At least this was my impression reading the story. And so then the hybrids are kind of presented as like they have ailments, they have short lifespans, they require constant medication. Without those things, they're not long for this world. And so they're kind of these pitiable creatures. And it's worth noting, I believe in the H.G. Wells book, the hybrids do not have names, right? They don't have character names. Beyond like nobody has a name.
Last night.
You read the entire book?
It's like 168 pages. It's like a novella.
Okay.
It's like a novella.
I knew I wasn't going to have time to revisit that, so I didn't even bother. But I am familiar with the story. And so I don't believe that they have names to the degree that they do in this book. There are hybrids in this book that are named. And so they are characters in the book, even if they aren't fully formed as your main characters. And I would have liked to have seen, I think one way you could have built her relationship to them and their relationship to Montgomery, key characters in the novel, is to bring them more into the fore. Because when we get to scenes later where the hybrids are sort of battling for their survival and for their chance to escape, you get to see these characters in action and you have great empathy for them. And so like I was very deeply attached to these hybrids that I knew so very little about, and I would have liked to have known more about them.
Well, at the end, because some of them die in the fight, and I didn't really feel, I felt...
You didn't feel anything about that?
Well, I felt bad that they died, but it didn't break my heart because I didn't know them.
I did. I
didn't know them.
What little I had in the book, I latched onto that. So I had great attachment to them.
No, I didn't have a great attachment to anybody in this story.
If this isn't revealing at all, guys, FYI, it takes very little to get me attached to your character in a story. You can give me like a page and I am locked into that character. So
you got to give me something.
Okay, all right. Number 5. What was your reaction to Dr. Moreau's experiments? Do you think there are any circumstances under which genetic experimentation is ethical? That's a big question.
It was a stronger theme in H.G. Wells' story, is just the question of ethics in science and the morality of just because we can do something doesn't mean we should do something.
Right.
And the H.G. Wells story, you see more of
it was more torturous, those experiments.
Yeah. And I mean, there's like a most of a day. And that story is told through the perspective of a character that's not even in this story at all. The storyteller in the original story, he pretty much spends a day just listening to this animal in agony, screaming the whole day. And so you see you get more of a sense of the horrificness of the experiments. You see how it's they're not called hybrids in the original story. They're called beast folk. More of the effects that it has on them, the conflict that it creates in them in terms of trying to follow the law that Moreau has set down for them, because he's pretty much deified himself in order to keep them docile and obedient. But that's warring with their true animal nature that is still trying to reassert. So you just get more of a focus on that, and more of that sense of, is this right? And why isn't it right? And again, this is something that it's in the background of this story, the books, the Daughter of Dr. Moreau, but that's not really the focus. The focus is Carlotta and how she's navigating her current life and her future.
I think that the Dr. Moreau's experiments are kind of lightly touched on in this book in ways that they're not really so, like, Dr. Moreau is not even really a true character in this story, in my opinion. He's in the background.
Yeah.
So his experiments are not really the focus of this story as much as they are in the H.G. Wells story, or even as much as they are in like film versions, which we'll get to. Let me see. I'm looking at number 6. I don't know if that's something that's where she says, how does the author use science fiction tropes to discuss subjects such as worker exploitation and the indigenous experience?
Because the whole purpose of Moreau creating the hybrids is because Lizalde, who's his patron, who's paying for all this research, right? He's basically creating these hybrids to be a workforce for Lizalde to work on his haciendas, because the Mayan rebels the indigenous people are too much trouble.
Yes.
Which, my thought is like, this is a really inefficient way to get a labor force, but
it's a very expensive way to get a labor force, but yeah. Okay, what did you enjoy most about the book? What were some of your favorite parts of the book?
Oh, and I kind of already mentioned, like, the one thing that I would give big kudos to is that Carlotta stayed true to her heart. She didn't just say, "Oh, well, Montgomery loves me, so I'm gonna go be in love with Montgomery,"
and try to get him off
even
the bottle.
even though she knew that if she had said that, he would have stayed. It wouldn't have been honest.
You know what I love about the way she wrote these characters is that even if she had said that, he says in the book, he's like, then you wouldn't be true to you, and I wouldn't love you. So like I love the fact that she is honoring what is true about these characters, and she's deliberately stating why it is we're not getting a happily ever after, is because it's like it wouldn't be true to these people. And so
I question whether he really truly loves her that way either, or if he's just like a drowning man who's just trying to grab onto. I
don't know. I feel like when we meet Montgomery, he has so much given up on life. He doesn't even care, and he doesn't even care enough to save himself from his downward spiral. Hence all of the drinking throughout the day. So it's like he's not looking for a life raft. She's not a life raft to him, because he wasn't looking for a life raft. He was determined to just drink himself into an early grave. So I think
by the end, at the end.
Well, no, I think it's genuine what he feels for her, but I think he's also like, and I think that's why he goes off, is because he's just like, you have a life to go live it. Go be you. Go be amazing. That you are like, I fell in love with you because of XYZ. Go do XYZ, because that's why I love you. I'm going to go do my thing, try to find inner peace in myself so that I can be happy. And my happiness will not center around you. It will center around the healing that I've done. So I believe, I don't know what I believe. Like, if you get to the end, because the next part of this question is, I think, do you think Carlotta and the hybrids reunite? I think they do. And what do you imagine happens if they do? I think she goes on to carry on humane work with the hybrids and sort of lives out her days caring for them and creating kind of a utopia for them, for herself and them. And whether or not he's part of that, he could be part of that, he could not. He may come back from his travels someday, he may not. What do you think?
Well, up to this point, none of Carlotta's plans for the future have panned out. So I don't know, because where could she live with them that they wouldn't
be
draw
found.
undue attention. I think it's a nice dream that she has. Is it realistic? I don't know. It
Yeah.
would be difficult.
Yeah.
It would be hard. I can see her like starting like a clinic for poor people.
Which I think which is part of like what I think she
That I
wanted
can
to
see
do.
her
So
doing,
that part,
but
yes.
I think maybe the hybrids are better off in the jungles with the rebels or wherever they scattered to, the ones that were still alive.
Okay, so this is a question. This next question is for you because you have the Island of Dr. Moreau freshest in your brain. What do you think of this reimagining in comparison with that book?
It was just a much different focus. The original story is, what's that character's name? It's basically this man, what was his name? Edward Prendick, who was like a natural historian. He is on a ship that runs aground or it sinks or whatever, and he's the only survivor. He gets rescued by Montgomery because Montgomery exists, also an alcoholic in the original story, who works for Dr. Moreau, has worked for Dr. Moreau for like 10 years. They take him into the island, and basically the story is his story that he wrote that his nephew finds X amount of years later. He's basically on that island for about 11 months. Again, it's just more the focus on the experiments that Moreau's doing. The focus is really more on horrific horror elements to that story. The one other big difference between that story and this story is that the beast folk, they do not retain their their humanness, for lack of a better word, whereas like Lupe and Cachito and the other hybrids, they're much more articulate, whereas the beast folk in the book have very limited vocabulary. The hybrids in the book, they're more like people, or present as people with fully formed thoughts, compound sentences, and they don't lose that ability even as they age. Whereas the beast folk in the book, and this is a big thorn in Moreau's side, is that the animal parts of them just eventually take over and they regress, and so they lose that
humanness,
or that Moreau creates them. So that's kind of his big disappointment. And so once they start reaching that stage, he kind of casts them out. So the island is populated with all these beast folk that are out there living, and they have these laws
that are considered failures to him.
Yeah,
because
they're failures to him. So he doesn't have any use for them. He doesn't take care of them. He doesn't feed them, but he gives them laws that they have to live by, like you shall not run on all fours, that kind of thing. You will not chase man. But as they slowly deteriorate and lose that, there's violence, and there's just more of that
horror
kind of
element,
horror aspect, and just you see like how unfair this is to put them through all that pain for what? For Moreau's ego, because he doesn't even really have a reason to be doing it other than his own hubris. At least in the book, Moreau.
At least in this book. Well, at least in this book.
He has a reason.
Yeah,
there's not a good reason, in my opinion, but he's given just a reason for why he's doing it.
Well, yeah, and there's a reason that his research and whatnot is being funded. It's for this purpose of let's build a race of workers that won't rebel.
Yeah, whereas in the H.G. Wells story, it's just Moreau's own hubris and arrogance and his own self-importance. What I think I would have liked to have seen, well, I don't know. Instead of being the daughter of Dr. Moreau, she was Dr. Moreau herself. Like, flip the genders.
That'd be cool.
That would have been more interesting.
Yeah,
or at least different.
But that's an interesting thing. And to the point that you just said before, like I think people coming into a story that is rooted in Dr. Moreau's world may come in expecting a certain thing, expecting a certain level of horror, a certain level of sci-fi, all of those elements.
I'm more concerned about people that read this book first and then go back to read the original story thinking they're going to get something similar, and it's
something
not.
Softer, and it's not that. But I liked the book. I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed diving into this world because it allowed me to dive into other Dr. Moreau reiterations. So I love the concept of this story. I love this writer. Like I said, I love the world building that she does. I think she always does a genuine, authentic, good job. What are your final thoughts?
I mean, I thought it was an okay book. I didn't love it. Didn't hate it. I don't know. I just never really invested in it. But I am intending to check out some of her other works because, like I said, I think she's a good writer. I think this just particular one wasn't high on my list, but I'm totally planning to check out some of her other works, and maybe some of those will hit better.
In this PDF, there are some amazing questions. There's treasure hunt questions, which is like your harder, more obscure stuff to try to name. So like one of the questions, Carlotta is named after an empress who visited Yucatan. Who is this empress? Veronica, by chance, do you know? You can look at the answer and cheat, but do you know?
Marie, Charlotte, Amélie, Augustine, Victoire, Clementine, Leopoldine. Oh my God, who names these people? That's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 names. Or also known as Charlotte of Belgium. Let's just go with that.
Also known as Carlotta of Mexico. So there's some good things in here. There's like some extra hard questions. So I love this. So there are a couple of lines. This is number 1 on the extra hard questions. There are a couple of lines that in the novel are essentially verbatim from Wells' original novel. So in The Daughter of Doctor Moreau, Moreau says, quote, "The human shape I can achieve almost with ease, but there is trouble with the hands and the claws, and there are painful gaps, ... but that must not concern you." Wells writes, "The human shape I can get now almost with ease." So that is lithe and graceful or thick and strong. But often there is trouble with the head and the hands and the claws, painful things that I dare not shape too freely. So yeah, we will include this for you guys. There's an afterword from the author. There's also some sketch art. There's a map of Mexico. Like it's brilliant. I love this. I think it's so well done. So kudos to that. So here's what's coming up in the near future. So June, Ronnie and I are going to be taking a much needed break. We will be rolling out some best of episodes from film discussions, from book discussions, things like that. And then when we come back in July is when we hit our 1 year mark. We'll do probably our next book club wouldn't come until August because we'll come back and we'll do some film discussions.
Because for a lot of people, reading slows down in the summer just because you're out there taking vacations, you're out there doing a lot of outdoor activities. So anyway, coming up for our next book club episode, which, like Valerie said, should be sometime in August. So you have plenty of time to read this book. Mm-hmm. It's called Monstrilio by Gerardo Sámano Córdova. It should be out in paperback by now because it was released in March of 2023. Yeah. So just a little bit on it. It's a literary horror debut about a boy who transforms into a monster who tries to be a man, and the people who love him in every form he takes. It's a thought-provoking meditation on grief, acceptance, and the monstrous sides of love and loyalty.
Sounds awesome.
So yeah, lots of good stuff.
Nice. Good. Okay, great. I'm excited. I'm excited for this one. All right. Well, thank you guys, everybody, for tuning in. We are so excited for this name change. We are so excited for this new chapter in our lives. Oh, let me not forget, you can find us at don'twatchatnight.com. And we are Don't Watch at Night. I love how I knew this going in and then immediately I chickened out and was like, maybe I don't know this. We are Don't Watch at Night Pod across all social media. So Don't Watch at Night Pod on Threads, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. And if you go to our YouTube now, we are starting to upload full episodes from our back catalog. So I think now we have the first 6 episodes of our podcast up on YouTube right now, and we're uploading 2 a week. So prepare for that. Go ahead and subscribe. Get subscribed across everything. Why would you not at this point? Why would you not subscribe and follow us so that you never miss an episode? Give us a rate and review while you're at it. If it's a 5-star review, if it's not, then just pass. Okay, that's it. We will see you next time.
Bye.
Don't Watch at Night is a Nest production hosted by me, Valerie, and Veronica. Editing by me. Music by Omar Chakor. Production support for this episode provided by Lorenzo Villarreal and Alex Street. Listen to new episodes of Don't Watch at Night every other Monday, and don't forget to give us a rate and review. It's the best way to help us grow.